DAG's monthly meeting. My name is Eli Storch. I chair the Design Advocacy Group. This is an unbelievable turnout. We've been really lucky to be in this space now for 5 months, and it's been really wonderful to get to exist alongside all the folks in this building and in this wonderful space. So we're thrilled to have you. We like to be together. We like to spend time together. So we used to go around one by one and everyone would tell us their name. We're not doing that anymore. So I put a minute on my watch that I'm not wearing and ask you to say hi to someone next to you. Check in, make sure you know everyone who's around you. I'll call you back up in about a minute. Advocacy work, an exhibition, a project, something that's relevant to the DAG group. Hi, Judith. What do you have?
I got something for you. Save the Tanner House. Save the Tanner House. National Historic Landmark in the heart of Strawberry Mansion. We worked very hard to raise money. It's a National Historic Landmark. So no matter who owns it, it's still relevant, big time. It's been too long, you all. I was the founding member who saw the tarp flying off the roof. Since that time, we found the owner, and we raised a lot of money. I'm a real estate professional. To have my name attached to a project with my 40 years of real estate background and it not be rehabbed by now is a sore thumb. Okay? So some of you all probably donated. So I'm going to say, please, let's save the Tanner House. Let's get it going. Let's rehab that property ASAP. Thank you all.
Yeah, that's how you do that. If anybody has anything, please throw your hand up at any point and we'll call on you. I'm going to jump through a few slides here. We are recording tonight. When we entered COVID and moved to Zoom, we didn't really have as much control over our information, so we went from off the record to on the record and started publishing our videos on YouTube and on our website. So going back to 2020, you can see there have been a few that haven't been posted for technology reasons and otherwise, but most of them are up there. So check those out. There's lots of good things on there to watch to keep up with everything that DAG has been doing. So we have a few things to start with. Marcia, where are you?
Yeah.
All right, Marcia Moss wants to lead us through this first one.
Thanks, Eli. Yes. I'd like to begin by saying that Jane Golden is a visionary. She made hard to hear.
Closer to me.
Okay, can you hear me now? All right, beginning by saying that Jane Golden is a visionary. She made Philadelphia the mural capital of the globe, and there will never be another Jane Golden. But now, mural arts has been lucky enough to have Emily Mello as its next leader, bringing the greatest credentials in the art world and also with community engagement. And we at DAG are looking forward to welcoming her and her great leadership.
Thank you, Marcia. So David Brownlee, I'm going to have you come up. Come on, you want to go after David? All right. You got a few slides here, so I'll advance them for you.
So a couple of things that we're watching with concern. The City's History Museum in the historic Atwater Kent Museum building, which was built as the Franklin Institute, is decaying. Not only have we abandoned this city, the project of having a history museum, fortunately, Drexel University has taken over the stewardship of the collection, but we've let the building molder. DAG joined a number of other organizations in writing a letter to the city saying, have you noticed the building's moldering? And I think at this point it's fair to say we received a reply that said, yes, we've noticed. And that's about it. We still don't have a history museum, and we still have a historic building that's in pretty bad shape. So we're continuing to watch that. What is that?
That is the select section from that letter.
Oh, yes, this letter is on our website. We joined a letter, we signed on to a letter written by the Preservation Alliance. We have a couple of distinctive buildings, architectural monuments of real character that the city owns, and that's about all you can say about them because nothing is happening with them. You may remember that 2 years ago, DAG participated in a competition to propose alternative uses for the Roundhouse, the old police administration building, that distinctive curvilinear building by Bob Geddes. We proposed that it might make a darn good bus station. It probably would have, but we, have a lovely one on the back street behind the gallery. The building still waits the purpose. It has a lot of land around it. It's a city property. It's a distinctive building. It has a complicated history, but heck, Philadelphia has a complicated history, and we can deal with that. Next. Another building, a distinctive building, a building on Logan Square, is the old, well, it was built as the municipal courts, became the family courts building. It is a spectacular example of Philadelphia's commitment to look like Paris. And on the inside, it has a wonderful suite of WPA murals. The building is protected. The interiors are protected. The city owns it. And development schemes have been going around the block circling for some time. There is some sort of rumor going that something may be happening. One of the possible tenants that's been proposed in some sort of consortium is the African American Museum, which could also use a better home. We don't know what's happening. There is radio silence on this. And finally, the William Way Center, the Philadelphia's really extraordinary LGBTQ center. Its building is the old Engineers Club. And in this city of engineers, that building is itself significant, and it's had an important role in this historic movement of our gay community to the forefront, but really a leadership position in social justice in America. The building is probably not adequate to their present needs. Their current announced plans are to simply tear it down. The building is designated and protected as part of the new Washington Square West Historic District, and we would expect that the stewards of a historic building, who are themselves making history, would take better care of it. Again, we're monitoring the situation. We've joined efforts to call attention to the problem. Inga Saffron has written a great column about it. We watch.
Thank you, David.
Hi, Christy Schneider. I work in public history museums, mentioning two 250th shows for your radar. Those of you who are glad you did not attend the Legionnaires Conference in July 1976. May, however, appreciate an exhibit called The Philly Killer at the Mutter Museum. It'll be up through the academic year if you have public health or built environment, sick building questions in your classes. You want to bring students or staff from firms. That's up at the Mutter. Also there is Philadelphia creating a city of medicine if you're interested in eds and meds, sort of institutional histories, but also mutual aid questions of Philadelphia history. Come take a look at those exhibits at the moment. Thanks.
Hey everybody, I'm Kat Hendon. I'm on the Design Advocacy Group Steering Committee, and I'm also a community leader for the city tree plan. And so a lot of you are aware in the last month these big microbursts that we had come through brought down a ton of old trees. And the Department of Public Health, along with the city tree plan, has put together some emergency response grants, and it looks like maybe about 5 neighborhoods are going to get a grant to do tree replanting. So I'm bringing it up because it's just a great time to reach out to your community tree tender group, join, and virtually every neighborhood has one. This is through PHS, Philly Horticultural Society, and most of the groups can use help with either if you want to get dirty and actually do the planting, that's great, but tons of them can also use administrative help, graphic design, anything like that. So if you have any skills you want to contribute towards getting our tree canopy a little bit more intact after those microbursts, we greatly appreciate it. Yes? Say again? So the responsive grant review is tomorrow. Well, you know, the storms went basically from Ardmore diagonally down through South Philly. Gordon Square was really messed up. A lot of giant trees in Fairmount came down, so I'm sure you guys have seen it, but it was pretty broad. So hopefully we can get some money into the right hands and get it going again.
So a couple other things that are going on. The city has submitted a request to the Third Circuit Court to rehear over their ruling regarding the President's House. It's been obviously a significant back and forth over many, many months, with the latest being the replacement of panels by the administration. So that went in on August 3rd. There hasn't been a response yet, but it's something that we will continue to watch, and I'm sure Michael Cord will show up here and tell us all about it when more happens. So something to focus on and keep an eye on. Some interesting things that are going on around the city. The opening of Broad Street Beer Garden in Love Park. Really interesting new beer garden using our little spaceship there over Love Park Garage. Really wonderful to see the activation after some time. It's multiple tiers, multiple layers of opportunity to sit and drink and connect and socialize. And it is a very welcoming, opening design as it sort of lends itself to being part of Love Park in a really attractive way. It does shine a bit of a light on Uptown Beer Garden across the street with its fences and its enclosed nature. So there's some interesting things in terms of the urban design and the creation of shape around that Penn Center area that we're looking at. I know George Claflin's been digging a bunch into that, and we're going to follow up with a little bit about that shortly. Wanted to give a little bit of love here to Repoint PHL, who's been pushing on a lot of these designation rescissions and demolition issues as they relate to the Philadelphia Historical Commission. Basically where illegal demolitions have caused structural problems, and then the demolition has been allowed rather than forcing the developer and the contractor to reconstruct and be held account to their actions. So Repoint PHL is doing some really good work, and they're really on the front line of a lot of this advocacy work. So take a look at what they're up to, see what they're focused on, and if you want to raise your hand and have something to say, that preservation@phila.gov email is a really good place to do it. So reach out there, let them know that, you know, demolition by neglect and demolition by, you know, poor stewardship is not an acceptable reason to allow for a rescission like this. Similarly, we brought this up at our last meeting, the Boyd Theater and the desire of that developer to remove the last bits of historic context in that building. I was walking by it the other day, and it is such a unique, remarkable piece of a building, piece of a structure that remains and truly seems like the right creative team could do something wonderful with it. And it doesn't need to be vacant, and it shouldn't be vacant, and hopefully that the Historic Commission can hold their ground and we can keep that piece of the building, which was the only thing left after an initial decision and initial negotiations. So that's what we have on our agenda here. If there's anything else, now's kind of your moment. We have a couple of really wonderful events coming up in the next few months. Tony Sorrentino, the relatively new CEO of the Fairmount Park Conservancy, is going to be with us in September. He's talking about the future and the larger planning that's happening there over in Fairmount Park. So we're very excited to have him to hear about all of those plans and the different parts and pieces that he and the whole team are setting into motion. So that's September 9th. And then October 14th, Jen Doherty from SEPTA is going to be with us, as well as Andrew Spekla from DVRPC, talking about transit-oriented communities and all of the really wonderful work that they've been doing, coordinating with the city. We're very hopeful that Octavia Howell is going to join us for that one as well, the planning commissioner, or planning director rather. So that's going to be a really interesting event. They've had some significant wins in the name of more transit-oriented development, better access to homes and proximity to our major commercial corridors. So I'm very excited for that one. It should be a great event on October 14th. All of that will be here. So we are not moving for the foreseeable future. So plan to be here for DAG events. So with that, let's get into it. I'm going to pass the microphone over to my colleague on the DAG Steering Committee, Laura Spina, to introduce David.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's wonderful to see all of you today. Thank you for coming out. As Eli said, I'm Laura Spina, and I'm on the DAG Steering Committee, and I'm very excited tonight to introduce you to our speaker, David Seltzer. David's love of rail transit started when he was a kid, living in Melrose Park near the Reading Railroad. He spent hours exploring Philadelphia and learning about the city's transportation system. Although he was interested and studied urban planning, his studies turned to business, and he earned his MBA from Wharton and went into public finance. And as we all know, plans are wonderful, but you need the money to back them up. So David built a career raising capital for public investment, including many of the major surface transportation projects for some of the largest transportation companies around the country, including SEPTA, MTA in New York, and Chicago's Transit Authority. He also worked for several years with the United States Department of Transportation. David and his wife Lisa are devoted to civic affairs here in Philadelphia. David co-founded Craft Now Philadelphia, a consortium that promotes the city as the nation's leading center of contemporary craft. He is a trustee of the Philadelphia Museum of Art and has chaired its Architecture and Facilities Committee. He previously chaired the Philadelphia Youth Sports Collaborative, the Philadelphia Gas Works, the Philadelphia History Museum, and was a longtime board member of Starfinder Foundation. Though he proved to be a true Philadelphian when he fulfilled a lifelong ambition to strut down Broad Street in a mummers parade with the Golden Sunrise New Year's Association. And maybe he'll show us his moves after the presentation. For years, whenever David traveled to other locales, he would always study and ride their transit systems. So when the pandemic kept everyone at home, David took the time to collect his knowledge and experiences traveling to write the book he's going to be presenting tonight. Viewing these transit systems through the design lens of a transit tourist, the book shows that a city's subway system is a unique way in understanding and appreciating a city. So now, please welcome David Seltzer.
Thank you, Laura. So, everyone here, I'm just blown away by the size of the audience. You can't all be trolley jobbers like I am. There's something else going on, and what came to my mind was the columnist David Brooks referenced the problem of second homelessness, which is those of us who have to summer where we winter. So maybe that's an explanation. So I do want to spend a few minutes talking about how each city's personality or character can be revealed through the design in its transit system. And there is a book that would be available if anyone's interested at the end, but this isn't intended to be an infomercial. I'd really like it to be generative in terms of thinking about how we can take some of the ideas from other cities and apply them here in Philadelphia. So you've probably all seen in the bookshops various travel essay books about railway journeys, scenic road trips, canal boat tours, but for some reason, no travel book had ever been written about sightseeing in a subway, and I'm here to correct that oversight. And that was the genesis, really, of the book Transit Tourism, which is about the architecture and art installations and graphics, the visual culture of subways around the world. And I had this idea, it did start, as Laura mentioned, during the pandemic, and I was drawing upon my many years of visiting different transit systems around the world. And I reached out to literary agents, because most publishers today, for nonfiction anyhow, have a gatekeeper. You have to have a literary agent representing you. And I wrote up a couple of chapters in Word with images, and I did an extensive research in publishers, Clearinghouse, I think it's called, and tried to find agents who might be interested in my subject matter. And the invariable comment I got back was, your book seems to be genre-defined, which meant that they couldn't figure out what section of the bookstore it would be located on. It had elements of travel essay writing, clearly a strong orientation to architecture and design. There was a bit of transportation history about each of the cities, 22 different cities that I wrote about, and no small part of personal memoir, and even, I think therapeutically for me, some self-help in terms of writing this out. The only thing missing, and I see it now as a tremendous oversight, the hottest section in the literature world now is Zomrom, which is zombie romance. So if I had the presence of mind to work that in, I think it would have been much easier. So I had to end up self-publishing the book initially with a book designer, a tremendous talent, a woman named Karen Zalesny, and had some copies printed up. And then after that happened, I was able to interest a publisher, Schiffer Books, in commercially publishing it as Transit Tourism. The original title I had chosen was Notes from the Underground, which I thought was an interesting turn of phrase, and the people at Schiffer said, you know, a lot of our book sale orders, or even, you can even order as a consumer from them online, people search alphabetically, and if you typed in Notes from the Underground, they'd have to go through 20 different Dostoevsky editions before they came to Seltzer, Notes in the Underground, so we changed the title. And in researching this book, I drew heavily on my own collection over decades, dating back really to, say, elementary school. I have now 500 books about subways, metros, u-bahns, and so forth, a fraction of which are shown here. My favorite category are the books about the art and architecture, and this is just a sampling here. It's going to be impossible for you in the back to see them, but many cities publish guidebooks to the art installations or the architecture of their systems. There's several dozen books that are just about that, not about the history or the technical aspects or the sociology or urban planning aspects of the transit system. I have a particular fondness for maps. My day job has been the dull world of municipal bonds, but my partners and I decided to name our firm Mercator Advisors because we like the charting and mapping, in our case, a financial path through for our clients, and maps have always registered strongly with me. Those of you who have looked through bookstores have probably seen on the right side of the screen there, is that the right side? Right side, yeah. Iconic Transit Maps by Mark Ovenden. He's written several books about it. Superb, very visual book. But there's other ones about the Vignelli map of the New York subway. I have 3 or 4 books just about the London Underground map, which itself is very important in terms of graphic design. I even have a few books about the arcane area of typefaces, and among other things I learned the difference between a type font and a typeface, something that had eluded me for a long time. Another major resource, though, is the internet. I had no idea until I started writing this book, the wealth of information that you can find there. There's a site called urbanrail.net by a guy who's published several dozen books, photo books really, about transit systems. And I found it to be a tremendous resource. MetroBits has lists of not just data about transit systems, but which systems have museums, which have their own bespoke typeface, you name it. Some of them show detailed track maps, if you're particularly dweebish like I am. Cardo Metro will show you the interchanges and how the interlockings, I should say, how trains get from one line to another. There's all sorts of resources. And maybe the one that would be of most general interest is called Metroliner. And it's one that shows, it's a YouTube site, which shows the organic growth of probably 50 different subway or metro systems around the world over time, showing how they, like kudzu, have grown. Except here in this country, they seem to have stagnated. However, nothing can replace doing the primary research, not where the rubber meets the road, but where the rail meets the track. And these are some of the pamphlets that I would take with me as I did either individual exploring or more often if I could find an architect or urban planner who shared my interest, get a bespoke tour of one of the subway systems written about in the book. But we first need to answer the question, what exactly is a subway or a metro? And I find it's sort of like the infield fly rule. It's no real hard fast thing, or maybe it's more like Justice Potter's comment about pornography. I know it when I see it. I know a subway when I see it, and there's 5 criteria that I think define the systems that are in my book. First of all, it has to be in a large urban area. It has to be fixed rail, so a bus tunnel does not cut it. I'm sorry, Boston, with your South Boston shuttle there. At least a portion of it should be underground, ideally, for it to be included for me as a metro. Entirely elevated ones are transit systems that don't have, to me, the same interest because part of it is the engineering marvel of building a line in a densely populated area with all sorts of other infrastructure. Multiple stations in the subterranean or tunnel section. So our Center City commuter tunnel would not qualify. 2 underground stations at Market East, I'll still call it, and Suburban Station. That's not enough for me. I think there needs to be, say, 4 to qualify. Just to pick an arbitrary number. There are some tweeners, though, or infield fly rules, like those of you who've been to London recently may have ridden on the Elizabeth line, which is an engineering marvel, but it's a line connecting two suburban rail systems to the west and east of London, with maybe half a dozen, or probably a dozen stations underground in various sections of London. That is, I would say, still a commuter rail system, not really a metro. And Munich and Beijing and Tokyo, many cities have done the same thing in connecting stub-end commuter rail stations with an underground tunnel. So I think we will give a brief dose of history here. This will be covered on the final exam, so be sure to take notes. This is showing decade by decade the gradual adoption of underground railways starting with London in 1863. You'll see there was a gap there, and then around the turn of the 20th century, there were a number of systems, including Philadelphia. I think we were the 10th city, the Market Street subway in 1907 or 8 was the 10th system. And then there was a gap, certainly during the Second World War. But then look at the explosive growth in the last 75 years. And on this bar chart, the cities whose type is in red, which you can't read unless you're in the first row, are in China. The cities with type in green are in India. And if you look on the 2010 and 2020 area, or sections of the chart, it's dominated by Asian systems who are investing billions and billions of dollars. I think the most recent system is Quito, which opened up about a year ago and is the highest elevation subway, even taking into account that it's beneath the surface. But there's others still being constructed, and many more of these are being expanded. So the concept for my book, Transit Tourism, is, as the title of the talk noted, that each system says something intrinsic about the character or nature, the persona of the city it serves. So, actually, I might have skipped a slide here. These are the ones that are shown in, or written about in the book that have a chapter. There's 22. I tried to limit myself to one system per nation, except for the U.S., when I wanted to hit the heritage systems of New York, Boston, Philadelphia, and Chicago. But each of those depicted there are covered in the book, but there's many, many more that I've written on that I would like to do a volume 2 if there's an overwhelming surge of demand for the book. I Schiffer to step up. But I may be one of the few people on the planet who's ridden subways on 6 continents. I defy anyone there to match that record, having picked up Cairo, Egypt, and Sydney, Australia in the last year. So I think there's, if Schiffer, if you're out there listening, I think there's a story to be told. So for each of the 22 cities, I do use a very subjective token ranking system, 1 to 4 tokens, based on convenience, how well does it serve getting around the city, ease of use, once you're in there, how navigable is it, the quality of the design, this is really the visual culture thing, and then lastly, the personality, which is the most subjective thing, how idiosyncratic is it of that city. And I won't dwell on this token ranking thing too much, except to say that I ranked each of the 22 cities, 1 to 4 rankings, tokens on these rankings, and the absolute doormat of the league is Philadelphia. So we have some headroom, some room for improvement. We definitely have not peaked yet, that's for sure. There's one other anecdote, ease of use. I went on an art museum trip to Korea. We spent most of our time in Seoul, which has a marvelous subway, just turned 50 years old. There's actually a museum exhibit about it that I went to. It's now one of the largest systems in the world. All the signs are in English and in Korean. We did take an overnight trip to a city in the south of South Korea called Gwangju. And I played hooky from there's a biennale there or something like that. I blew that off and decided to ride the one-line subway there. Myself, no tour guide. I go into the station, I go down the steps. There's no English signs, it's all in Korean, because it's not really a huge tourist center. And I'm fumbling with my credit card. There's this vending machine there, all Korean characters, and I'm there 5 minutes, unable to figure out how to work it. A young Korean couple comes down the steps. They see me bewildered. I said to them, "Do you speak English?" And they said, "Well, yes, we do," as many Koreans do. And I said, "Thank God, I cannot figure out how to get a fare card out of this vending machine." They look at one another, and then the guy says somewhat sheepishly, "That's a book vending machine. The fare cards are actually..." So Gwangju, maybe not even get one token in terms of ease of use. So for the visual culture, there's 5 criteria. The architecture of both the stations and the head houses or entrances, the rolling stock or vehicles themselves. I've mentioned the maps before. The system logo, which is the identifier, how the system presents itself, to its audience in terms of a corporate presence. Obviously, the lettering that's used. And then lastly, the art installations and any historical features that are incorporated into the design. So rather than go through 22 cities, I'm just going to pick a couple of highlights featuring each of these criteria to show a little leg in terms of what's in play. So first, the stations and the entrance architecture. So those of you who've traveled around have noticed that in some cities there's a uniform or not ubiquitous, but maybe common architecture for the entranceways. New York historically had those stairways which had the globe lights. They've sort of fallen out of fashion, but I've learned that back in the day, probably the 30s or 40s when they started using these, orange meant there was a cashier there, part-time, green meant all the time, and if it was a red globe, it meant it was an exit only. Paris, of course, has 70 or 80 of the Hector Guimard Art Nouveau, marvelous, sensuous entrances I guess it's cast iron for the metro there. And then London for the first of the tube lines, not the 1863 initial metropolitan and district lines, which were cut and cover, very shallow, excavated, but the ones that were bored a tunnel deeper. Leslie Green did these terracotta oxblood red features. You'll see it at Covent Garden Station and some of the older stations on the Bakerloo, Piccadilly, and Northern Line. Some systems for the interior stations have a house style. So Washington, D.C., for example, has the coffered ceilings that are redolent of the Jefferson Memorial or Union Station for that matter. And for the first years of the metro system, most of the underground stations follow that, very stately, monumental looking. London, obviously, for the board or underground tube stations have the tubular shape to them, and that gave the name tube to the underground, a term that's used even for the surface lines. And news alert, over half of the mileage for the London Underground is actually above ground, so tube or underground is a bit of a misnomer. On the other hand, certain cities have decided to have different architects do each station. So unlike Washington, where Harry Weiss and Associates out of Chicago came up with the uniform design, in Russia, Moscow, which was the first system in Russia, they used different architects, and for a communist people's paradise had a very bourgeois sense of taste, very opulent design, looking kind of like Versailles or the Louvre. I mean, it's really magnificent, especially in the 30s. These were the so-called palaces of the people. And I recall one of the writers, I have several books about the Moscow Metro, noted how could a country that gets it so right below ground get it so wrong above ground? So the only system in the book I haven't actually ridden is Moscow. We had a trip all set there in 2000, pandemic hit. We had to delay it for a year, pandemic was still a problem. Then with the invasion in Ukraine and the declining relations between the US and Russia, I didn't think taking photographs inside metro stations would be a very wise thing to do. I didn't want to end up in a gated community, so I do have to go. And in my travels, I found there's surprising similarities in very disparate cities. For example, Budapest and Buenos Aires are 7,500 miles apart. They both built systems early on. Budapest, I think, is the second oldest, 1896. And that's architecture. It was built, it looks to me, reminds me of an Edwardian men's locker room. You might see that, could be the Racket Club in Philadelphia. There's wood paneling and very nice white tile. About 10 years later, 15 years later, Buenos Aires built its first line, the A line, and it looks remarkably similar, but no sort of architecture. Maybe it was a Hungarian immigrant who inspired that look. In a more modern vein, Munich built its metro in the 70s, and it's an outstanding system, straight 4 token rankings in all categories. And they had this station, which I won't pretend to pronounce. In fact, I'm avoiding any of the German or Eastern European station names. But there's a very similar station in Budapest, different architects, but also use the color panelings. That's one of the serendipities of exploring around. So, vehicles. A lot of people who are interested in transit really like taping train noises and things like that. That's not the way I roll. I'm not really into the rolling stock, as it's called, the rail cars. And what I found is that the subway cars all tend to look, not all, but many of them tend to look alike from one system to another. Whether it's in Istanbul or Buenos Aires or Tokyo, the beige interior, the same sort of poles and strap hangers. However, there are occasional exceptions. And on the left there, right there, you're right, is Glasgow. And that gentleman standing there is not an NBA basketball player. He's probably 5'9". And it's so diminutive a system, you cannot stand upright in it. The Glaswegians call it the world's largest model railway. It's also strange, it's a 6.5-mile circle line that was built in 1896, originally pulled or powered by cable, like a rope tow. And it kept breaking down, and what Glasgow discovered, which we know here in Philadelphia, is nobody likes their cable service. So what they did in about 1920-25 is replace it with electric. It's still only one short circle line around downtown Glasgow. Glasgow gets 4 stars for idiosyncrasy. It's really an amazing system. The maps hold a special place in my heart. So the London map on the left of 1932, that's geographically accurate, what the different lines look like. And there was an engineer, I believe an electrical engineer, working for London Transport named Harry Beck, who on his own initiative decided, well, what if I did something that wasn't trying to show accurate geography, but instead made it easier for a passenger to know the sequence of stations and where he should change, he or she should change. And he, on his own volition, designed the first London Underground map in 1933. And effectively, that map has been used there ever since. And not only in London, but around the world. It really is an icon of graphic design and incredibly influential in so many ways. And the roundel there, too, in the lower right corner, is another important signifier of the underground. And that's used, that circle with the slash through it, not just for the underground, but for the buses, for ferries, for everything, different color schemes. Very powerful sense of graphics there. And that original tube map appears today. That's just the central London part. And then when I went to visit Madrid, I saw that their map looked almost identical to the London Underground. And it's very interesting because Madrid's system was built probably in the late teens, and the designer of it had visited Paris and London, and he drew elements of both in coming up with the design scheme for the Madrid Metro. Here on our shores, we see on the left the Boston Metropolitan Transportation Authority map showing in cowpath-like fashion the winding route of the different lines in Boston. Very confusing for an Auslander. And then when the system was expanded into a larger regional transit agency in the 64, I believe it was, one of the first things the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority, they renamed themselves, did, they did two things. One, they adopted the symbol of the T in a circle that they borrowed from Stockholm as their identifier. It's now eponymous with the subway system. It's called the T by locals there. But they also decided to completely rebrand the map and the station. So it's a schematic map, heavy stylistic debt to London, designed by Cambridge 7 architects. They also did some other terrific things for having inbound walls, orange and red, brick, outbound walls, blue and green. Really, really inventive. And one of the prized books in my 500-book collection is an exhibition catalog from the Boston Institute of Contemporary Art from 1967 called Design in Transit. It goes through the design thinking that went into that makeover. Some of the maps are very simple. You see the circle line for Glasgow, and the tour guide I had was an architect with a firm called Dress for the Weather in Glasgow, very appropriate. But he said the University of Glasgow architecture students, I guess at graduation, they had a custom of taking the circle line, getting off at each stop, going up for a pint and a pub below, and getting back on. I can't imagine doing it. He said there's really no problem because if you miss your stop, it'll always come around again. Tokyo, you see how complex that is. There's two different operators in Tokyo. One has, I think, 10 lines, the other 4 lines. To add further confusion, a number of the commuter rail lines run through either their own subway tunnels or sometimes they share tunnels with the subway system itself, the rail and the tunnel. So you have to be careful what train you're getting on. But the map itself, by giving numbers and letters to each line and each station, makes it relatively easy to navigate. Some of the maps are very elegant. The one on the left, Moscow, I think probably the handsomest metro map design. It shows they have 2 concentric circle lines that they've constructed, and you can't possibly see it, but the only geographic identifier on the entire map is a red star in the very center where the Kremlin is located. I think that's brilliant design. It also has the very sturdy looking M as their symbol for the metro, very Cyrillic looking. On the right is Mexico City's map. They may have recently replaced it, but the one they used for years, it looks like it might have started out as a schematic, diagram and perpendicular map like London, and then someone put it in the washing machine and high dry, and came out all wrinkled. And I have no idea why they felt it was advantageous to show the bumps in the road. Logos and lettering. So a lot of them do use the letter M, because metro is a universal word. First adopted by the initial Paris system. So Istanbul, LA, Metro, Mexico City, Lance Wyman, an American, did the graphics for that, both the logo, or not both, but the logo, the lettering, and the map. Milan and other Italian cities use a white M on a red background. We talked about Moscow, Paris, and Washington Metro. But not all have these very sort of masculine, sturdy-looking symbols. This is Brussels. It's very Zoftic looking. It's as if the designer had one too many Belgian chocolates and it's sort of loaded the design. Very strange looking. It doesn't look streamlined or anything of that sort. So we spoke about Madrid, one of the few to have a diamond shape. I think Barcelona might as well, but Madrid really uses it as its brand. And I mentioned before that the designer, the architect, whose name I'm blanking on, drew inspiration from both Paris and London systems that were operational at the time. And to me, the logo that they use looks like it could have been the love child of London and Paris. And somehow I lost the London roundel there, but it looks like a combination. So Stockholm introduced the T when they did their first graphic design initiative in the 50s. Boston acknowledged and adopted it to its own use. Montreal uses a single arrow down, doesn't use any corporate ID. Sao Paulo uses two arrows up and down. New York has an unusual one. To me, it looks like you're standing on the platform watching the train just leave the station. I'm not sure it's sending the right message in terms of audience building. Then Paris, I had to do a lot of research on this. Paris, that's the RATP, and I won't torture you by trying to pronounce it in French, but if you look at the literature from RATP, the agency, it says, well, it's supposed to be a schematic map of the River Seine in blue and the circumferential highway in green around it. But it's also intended to symbolize the aspirational nature of mankind striving for excellence. And I thought that was a little pompous, and then I went onto one of those websites, and some wag said, I don't know, it looks to me like a woman immensely enjoying herself. So I'm very baffled by that particular. So the lettering. Boston introduced really, I think, Helvetic lettering to the US in a big way for public signage. All caps. New York with Maximo Vignelli and Bob Norda, a Dutch designer, did the graphic system for the MTA, which was unintelligible to anybody but a born and bred New Yorker who knew the BMT from the IRT, 90. And they came out with this really beautiful signage system and very clear for New York City. London's typeface is very closely associated with London. Edward Johnston designed it in 1916, and it still looks fresh today, I think. In fact, the new Aptos lettering on Microsoft really uses the same, it's essentially Johnston typeface with a curled L at the end, and it's now used actually it's used in all sorts of public lettering in Heathrow Airport and hospitals and everything. The Johnston letter face, the typeface, has really become London's handwriting. And those of you may recall that famous adage about the 18th century man of letters, Samuel Johnson, who said, when a man is tired of London, he's tired of life. For me, when a man is tired of Johnston, he's tired of London, because it's so ubiquitous in the city. Mexico City used the Lance Wyman Tipo Metro. Looks to me like 2001 Space Odyssey. Same era, pretty much, mid-60s. And then Paris has both their old Hector Guimard Art Nouveau lettering and the new custom crafted Parisine, which is now in many of the stations. So, art and history installations. There's some that have really beautiful tile work that could be museum quality in its own. Brussels has a magnificent system, and in fact, they get their guidebook is really an art. They view it as the longest art gallery in the world. You can go and see these terrific installations there. Istanbul has, in a Levantine way, the Iznik tiles are an identifier there, and that system is also now one of the 10 largest in the world. It's well worth a visit. Some cities use murals. Mexico City is the city of murals. There are no Diego Rivera murals in the metro, but there are some other famous muralists who have done work. This one on the left is showing the history of Mexico City. On the right is this very clever mural done in Buenos Aires, which has a very stylish system. Then some cities have historical monuments inside the station. So when they were building the Mexico City station right by the main plaza there, interchange station, they uncovered an Aztec temple and they incorporated that into the station design. So the Mexico City Metro agency is fond of saying that they're the most visited tourist attraction in Mexico because tens and thousands, probably several hundred thousand people a day cross through that station. When Naples more recently was excavating their system, they came across a Roman temple, and that's been incorporated into the Duomo station. Then Boston, which gets things a little different, rather than having a monument in a station, they have a station in a monument. And if you were to go to the old State House, the State Street subway station is in the basement where that arrow's pointing of this historic structure from the early 18th century. So I will go through just 3 or 4 systems very quickly, just to give you a taste of how the city's persona is in fact reflected in visual culture. Montreal, jaunty, elegant, and brimming with Gallic self-confidence. And the stations which were built for Expo 67, the system opened then, still look very fresh and mostly different architects for each system, or each station. And here we see the subway cars, which are very svelte and elegant, and I think the most beautiful transit cars. If I were to have an affair with a transit car in Montreal. And even the station entrances, the super graphic showing the logo for the Montreal Metro at the De La Concorde station. Sao Paulo, it's a bustling, brash, bold city that embraces mid-century brutalism but does so with style. And the stations there use largely poured concrete, whether it's an underground station or Armenia, shown on the right as an elevated station. Very muscular, but there was some attention to detail and to design. It wasn't a mechanical engineer who designed it. I mean, I'm not offending mechanical engineers there. One of their stations, Samare, is beneath a roadway. It's the lower bridge there. Sao Paulo is very hilly, and it's mostly underground, but if there's a ravine, the station would go, or the line would go above ground. So this is a station situated on a ravine where the train line briefly comes to surface before it goes back to ground. And then maybe most attractively, they have very bold graphic art, sturdy art in the stations to soften the look of the poured concrete. Unlike, say, Washington, D.C., which doesn't have the same level of color. So it really makes Sao Paulo much more appealing to me. Naples, a theatrical and variegated or eclectic city. The station on the left, Toledo, the circle there is actually at the top of the escalator, is a cone that goes up probably 5 or 6 stories to the surface. It's a very deep station. It's like you're in the base of Mount Vesuvius looking up to the sky. And this station was rated by the Daily Telegraph in London out of 3,500 subway stations in all of Europe, the most beautiful subway station. So it's a must-see if you go to Naples. And that their thought for design extends beyond the interior of the stations. The Salvador Rosa, the outside of otherwise kind of bland apartment buildings, has been decorated artistically to make a real sense of occasion. They also have some amazing art installations. One by Michelangelo Pistoletto, who uses the mirrored stainless steel and decals so that it's hard to see from this image, but the decals are life-size and it's almost indistinguishable from the passengers standing at the end of the platform. These become part of the artwork where you're there. And then on the Universalist station, Karim Rashid, very well-known graphic designer, who I think now is based in New York, but maybe is Egyptian, has done a marvelous and very energetic decoration there, or installation there, I should say. Stockholm, a city where contemporary design meets art for the people. They may have been one of the first cities to really embrace that. So the one station I thought was particularly interesting, Kungsträdgården, is on the site of a palace of that name that was buried and forgotten about and rediscovered when the new, I think it's the Blue Line was being constructed. And they kept some of the original artifacts that were uncovered in the excavation in situ, as well as new decorations. And maybe most or better well known is the so-called cave stations in Stockholm, where there's 20-some stations that were blasted out of granite, and rather than putting some industrial surface over the rough rock, they just spray painted cement over them and asked artists to do contemporary illustrations. And you'll see from the next two pictures some really amazing views. So that also is a must-see if you ever get to Stockholm. So, bring us back to reality. I think charitably it could best be said that our station design is minimalist, and in all my travels, and I've been on 60 different subways, that's only about a third or less of the systems worldwide. But the most forlorn subway stop of them all is the Fairmount station on Ridge Avenue. It is depressing. And as the Quaker City, we tend to favor modesty and simplicity. That's the Broad Street subway for the Logan and Wyoming stations. But we haven't really gotten very far. The one on the right is, I think, 22nd Street on the subway surface cars, the green line. It could maybe be just best described the style as late lavatorial. It was some engineer just put up a really timid design. So wouldn't it be a great idea if our stations here in Philadelphia looked more like the Louvre and less like the Louvre? So I think I would like to have a groundswell of discussion, not tonight necessarily, but at DAG, about how we can improve the appearance of our transit stations. Now, it isn't all negative. There have been some bright spots, and it's always darkest just before the dawn. So those of you who've seen 5th Street, Tom Judd's amazing installation, very inventive reworking of history. It cost less than 1% of the $25 million makeover of that station to have his art installation there. It was actually a competition of about a dozen artists who were invited to submit things, and he won it, and it's just fantastic. That should be our bellwether for the future. For any station makeover, we should have that level of improvement. The 1% for art, they're supposed to be doing that anyhow, and I don't think it's really enforced. There have been improvements to the Center City concourses, although still some suspicious puddles. The Kieran Timberlake Dilworth Park entrance is beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And not quite as dramatic, but the newly reopened Franklin Square station on the Patco line, which had been shuttered for 40 years, and I hope it stays open, brings some light into the platform and is an improvement. And this is all part of, or could be done in connection with SEPTA's rebranding as Metro of its transit lines. So I saw the William Way thing about the LGBT, and I was very gratified to see the first 4 transit lines also share that acronym. It sort of goes off the rails with the D and the M, but we'll think of something. It unquestionably is a wayfinding and an aesthetic improvement. And it's, I just have a couple of shots here of how even something as minimalist and inexpensive as just uniform signage can really help enhance the rider experience. And maybe this rebranding can help us take more pride in our subway system. So I would like to leave the thought that why not encourage SEPTA, and this map here was showing each of the stations that were going to get complete makeovers, and some of them have already been done. This is a couple of years old. But have them spend the extra 1% to do art competitions to really make it a much better environment. There is a bit of an infomercial. If you're interested in learning more about these systems, Head House Books, marvelous bookshop on 2nd Street, has some stands over there, and some of the seats have bookmarks in them. I also have a website that doesn't cost anything, and you can look and find some more information. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Get that microphone going. But if you have any questions for David, thank you so much for sharing with us. Please come up. We're going to keep the questions quick and snappy, and we'll get through as many of them as we can. All right? So if you have any questions, please come on up. And Sasha, if you're here, could you help me turn the microphone on? Start with this one, and we'll go back and forth.
Yes, wouldn't it make sense to have some kind of marriage between the transit stations and the mural art program? Since one of them is world renowned and the other one is whatever.
Excellent. I do believe Mural Arts has been involved in some of the work that was done in the South Broad Concourse and maybe suburban stations. Perhaps someone here knows more about that. But I think there's been some pilot programs, but no universal pursuit of that.
David, thank you so much for this erudite conversation and this wonderful book presentation. I'm excited to purchase the result. But my question is, I have many questions, but I'll just lead with what the gentleman who asked about mural arts. And, you know, I think that mural arts is an amazing program. I'm thrilled with the work they're doing, but I do think there needs to be some diversity in terms of the application of public art throughout all of Philadelphia. And the lack of transparency and the lack of access to information is astonishing to me. Do you know, is there any one or two things that are holding us back from achieving like any kind of artistic greatness that might be something in New York, LA, they're doing fantastic work. Why can't we? Funding. Besides funding.
Yeah, it is a funding question, but I think the real issue is there hasn't been the drive at the board level of SEPTA to make this a priority. I think there's been general managers who see the value of it, but it is a beleaguered, financially beleaguered system, and it needs some air cover from board leadership and the counties and the state, that this isn't seen as a frivolous use of money, but it's a way to build ridership and show respect for the paying transit by investing more in the environment.
Thank you for an interesting talk. Thank you for elevating Charlie Jolly from the silly thing that Pat called it back in the 60s. But I'm wondering if there's some way, with all these metros around the world, to incorporate into design somehow. That would take a big farm with you I've been in. There's some language. If I'm somewhere and I don't speak the language, like you couldn't figure out how to buy a ticket, you thought you were buying a ticket instead of a book. Maybe there could be some way to incorporate different languages and some universal symbolism so people would say, with the token or whatever, to buy it. Maybe we can incorporate that as part of the design in some way that multiple languages, having a mural about a stage, but then you can have 10 languages on the wall or something. So perhaps that would give us something thinking about. Thank you.
I'll just say in response that part of my challenge in Gwangju, South Korea, might have been operator error. I can't put it all on the transit agency.
Hello. Thank you. Wonderful talk. You mentioned that SEPTA could be stepping up better, but I'm wondering about how other cities have actually funded these improvements, because they're really reflections on the cities more than almost the transit agency. And where, I don't know if this is something that you've gone into, but have you seen whether there has been more investment and support from municipalities where there are successful train stations? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so I was just in Los Angeles, and they have a very vigorous art and transit program. They just opened a new extension to the Wilshire subway there, and it's a very important component of how the agency views itself and presents itself. So they have a dedicated sales tax, actually 3 to 4 half-cent sales taxes, hundreds of millions of dollars coming into the transom for transit. SEPTA is one of the few public transit agencies in the nation without a dedicated funding stream. It's hand-to-mouth, year-to-year appropriations. The city only contributes 3 1/3% of the capital costs for each project. That's the funding formula. We need to have some dedicated regional sales tax base, or not sales tax, but tax base of some sort, to allow there to be enough cash flow to invest more in the appearance of the stations, in my mind.
I ride SEPTA, and I see it at a great disadvantage. The trains, they can control who's paying, who's not, but on the buses, I see so many people, they go in the back door, or they just brazenly walk in, they go by the operator, and the operator, I think, is instructed not to confront them. So we have so many scofflaws, we have so many people riding for free on the buses, so it doesn't support the system.
Correct. Now, I don't do buses, as I said earlier. But I do think, yeah, if there was less fare evasion, there'd be more revenue to fund some of these projects.
I was just curious, what are your thoughts on what it takes to change the culture of a transit system? Just from riding SEPTA, I feel like I've seen some horrendous things on the train. And my understanding is that, I've never been to Tokyo, but my understanding is that there's a certain standard for expectation that you keep it clean, you throw your trash out, things like that. What do you think it takes to change the culture for the transit system?
That's tough, and if you go to any of the Asian systems, even the European systems, and even Latin American, spotless, no one litters there. They view it as part of their property. We don't have that acceptance here in the U.S., so it'll take a while. But again, I think political leadership is to start at the top, and then it will percolate down. And also, Philadelphia's been kind of historically a railroad city. Pennsylvania Railroad, Reading Railroad. Transit hasn't been, people don't feel affectionate about transit here like they do in Boston, even though they grumble about the T, they're very attached to it. Or New York, they complain, but they love the subway. We don't have that same culture here because we're more of a rail city, commuter rail.
I haven't talked to the new director yet, but what do you think about taking the whole mural arts program underground instead of outside?
Well, I'd like to see the artwork be variegated, so not just murals, but sculpture and light and other things. If you look at what some of the other systems have done, it's multiple inks. Even tile work doesn't need to be late lavatorial. It can be much more better than that.
Just wondering if you had a chance to talk more with other organizations or partners who are also interested in similar work. I mean, it sounds like you did a lot of, obviously, on-the-ground research, but did you get a chance to talk to like the workers or the company owners or even other like just local organizations trying to kind of figure out who's a little bit more tapped in here in Philly specifically?
No, I was just a transit tourist. I'm not really trying to develop a political movement, but I think that would be a great thing for design advocacy group to seize as an initiative going forward.
The issue I want to ask about for your travelers is having information only for transit insiders. So, for example, I go past 30th Street Station in West Virginia, and the people coming in. I go past 30th Street Station nearly every day. People are coming out of the station. And I get stopped so many times. People asking, where's the subway? Because there's a big entrance, and it has a B, or an L, and a T. And that's it. Nobody gave them a legend or anything on Amtrak. So, you know, here they put all this energy into a nice system, but you have no idea what it means. And have you seen that elsewhere? Have you seen how they do nice systems that show but also make it usable by a stranger?
Well, SEPTA does have the S in a white sign and black background that they're starting to use as a uniform indicator. At 30th Street specifically, I recall back in the day, the underground concourse that connected the 30th Street subway station to the train station. They did a complete no-brainer to get over there. So that was supposed to be part of the remodeling of 30th Street. I don't know whether that's still in the plan.
Given your background, I think it's interesting that you didn't discuss, maybe you have it in the book, financial models of these different systems. And I wonder if you could sort of describe broadly what you think the different types of financial models are and which are most successful. This would be particularly interesting if we're thinking about a new financial model for SEPTA. It would be nice to know which ones actually work.
Well, this is obviously the profession I've been in for over 40 years, but I don't want to put people's feet to sleep. So I'm not going to dwell on it, other than to say many other systems in the U.S., Chicago, San Francisco, L.A., Seattle, Atlanta, Dallas, use a dedicated regional sales tax. That would be a good place to start. Tokyo is not replicable here in terms of the real estate potential. Hong Kong's the same way. They're actually revenue positive because of developing over the stations, but we just don't have that density or orientation here, unfortunately. So I don't want to overstay my welcome, Eli, so.
So I'm curious what you think about the idea that station design is extraneous or frivolous, that what transit agencies should concentrate on is performance.
We have to have both. You need on-time performance. You also have to have an environment that is less like a loo and more like a Louvre, I think, to attract voluntary ridership. You can't get Uber or walk or a bus for that matter. You have to have a positive incentive to want to ride. So it's operationally based, which I don't really dwell on in the book. I was more focusing on the visual culture.
Thank you. Thank you. Last one.
You may not have noticed this about Philadelphia, but we're going crazy. This is a very exciting city now, and the fact that the transit system is not what you think it should be, okay, but just wait, because we are becoming the great national capital, and just you wait and see.
Just one 30-second anecdote. Last night, I was talking to the bartender at the Good King Tavern, that some of you may know, who's a Southerner who he's lived in New York, he's lived in the South, he's lived in Chicago, and he moved to Philadelphia a couple of years ago, and he said, I asked him, how would you describe Philadelphia? He said, well, say Southerners are nice, but they're not kind, whereas Philadelphians are kind, but they're not necessarily nice. It's a very interesting distinction.
Please join me in thanking David. Wonderful to see so many of you here. We'll be back on September 9th. As you're leaving, if you're interested in looking at the book, it's back there against the far wall. This wonderful building only has one elevator and it's not up there. So if you're ever looking for our ADA access off of Pine Street, if you come in via the Pine Street door, going forward, that's the way you can get in without having to navigate the stairs. And if you want to go to Frankie's in back, you can also go right out that back door. Have a good night.
Nice to meet you, Bob.